Yeah, at least 30 people associated with former President Trump have received these federal grand jury subpoenas. A lot of them went out last week, from what we're told. In at least 2 cases, not only were these associates of Donald Trump subpoenaed, but they had their phones seized as well. Based on what multiple knowledgeable sources have told us, the investigation by the grand juries into this alleged fake electors scheme to flip the 2020 election results into the money raised and spent to overturn the election, including by former President Trump's Save America PAC, and into his January 6th Stop the Steal rally.
So what just happened? This is not a threat or a talking point. Congress has already sent people from Trump's inner circle to real federal prison. The accountability campaign is not coming. It already happened and it is documented. Steve Bannon, convicted of contempt of Congress, served 4 months behind bars. Peter Navarro, convicted of contempt of Congress, served a 4-month sentence. These are senior advisors to the President of the United States who went to federal prison because they defied congressional subpoenas and Congress held them accountable for it.
Former top Trump aide Peter Navarro was arrested this morning at Reagan National Airport as he was waiting to board a flight.
Instead of calling me and saying, hey, we need you down at court, we've got a warrant for you, I would gladly come. What did they do? They intercepted me getting on the plane. And then they put me in handcuffs. They bring me here. They put me in leg irons.
Appearing in federal court, Navarro complained about how he was apprehended, calling it despicable.
Beyond the contempt convictions, the January 6th committee made a historic criminal referral recommending that the Justice Department charge Donald Trump himself on multiple counts, including inciting insurrection and conspiracy to defraud the United States. They named Meadows, Giuliani, Eastman, Clark, and others as potential co-conspirators whose conduct merited criminal scrutiny. This already happened. It is on the record.
And like Mayor Scott and Governor Moore, leaders in Chicago are also pushing back against the president's plan for their city.
Trump pointed to recent violent crime in Chicago, but Illinois' governor says the president just wants to throw his weight around.
None of this is about fighting crime or making Chicago safer. None of it. For Trump, it's about testing his power and producing a political drama to cover up for his corruption.
Let me explain why the current moment matters so much. The contempt votes and criminal referrals from the January 6th investigation were not the end of this story. They were the beginning. They established that Congress has both the will and the legal tools to hold Trump's allies accountable when those allies defied congressional authority. The pattern that those precedents established is now being picked up and extended by a new generation of congressional investigators who are looking at what Trump's second-term officials are doing and asking the same questions the January 6th committee asked.
Navarro, who made an initial court appearance on Friday in Washington, said the committee was harassing him for punitive purposes. Navarro has said in media interviews and in his 2021 book that he helped to coordinate an effort to halt certification of Joe Biden's victory and keep Trump in power. Navarro has contended that his communications are protected by executive privilege.
The machinery of congressional accountability that proved it could actually deliver consequences when Bannon and Navarro went to prison is being activated again with new targets, new allegations, and new political urgency. Let me start with the most historically significant action in this whole story because it deserves to be fully appreciated for what it was. In December of 2022, the January 6th committee made a criminal referral of Donald Trump to the Justice Department, a congressional committee formally recommending that the former president of the United States be criminally charged.
In an unprecedented step, the House Select Committee investigating January 6th voted to recommend the Justice Department file criminal charges against former President Donald Trump for his role in the attack on the U.S. Capitol.
The whole purpose and obvious effect of Trump's scheme were to obstruct, influence, and impede this official proceeding, the central moment for the lawful transfer of power.
The charges they recommended included inciting insurrection against the United States government, conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of an official proceeding, and common law fraud. Those are serious federal felonies. The committee did not stop with Trump. They named Mark Meadows, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark, and others as potential co-conspirators whose conduct the committee believed merited criminal scrutiny. The scope of that referral, the seniority of the people named, the specificity of the allegations, and the historical significance of a congressional committee formally recommending criminal prosecution of a former president.
The charges: obstruction of an official proceeding, conspiracy to defraud the U.S. government, conspiracy to make a false statement, and inciting or assisting an insurrection were unveiled as the panel held its final public meeting.
No man who would behave that way at that moment in time can ever serve in any position of authority in our nation again. He is unfit for any office.
All of it combined to make that December 2022 referral one of the most significant congressional actions in modern American history. The contempt story deserves its own serious examination because the Bannon and Navarro convictions are genuinely important precedents. In April of 2022, the House voted to hold Peter Navarro and Dan Scavino in criminal contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with January 6th committee subpoenas. The vote referred them to the Justice Department for potential prosecution. Navarro was ultimately convicted and served a 4-month prison sentence. Bannon was also convicted and served 4 months. These are not small consequences. These are senior presidential advisors who went to federal prison because they believed their loyalty to Trump and their proximity to presidential power would protect them from the legal consequences of defying congressional subpoenas. They were wrong. The legal system followed the process. The convictions happened. The prison sentences were served. The message that's sent to every other Trump ally who might be tempted to defy congressional oversight is one that has not been forgotten. Defying congressional subpoenas has a legal cost. It has been applied. It has resulted in prison time. It can be applied again. Now, let me talk about what is happening right now in terms of the fresh wave of congressional accountability demands. The story did not stop with the January 6th committee and the Bannon and Navarro convictions. Recently, a group of lawmakers led by several prominent members of Congress demanded that inspectors general investigate Trump's diversion of federal agents away from white-collar crime enforcement toward immigration crackdowns. 27 lawmakers formally demanding an investigation into a specific alleged policy decision by the Trump administration that they argue warrants criminal scrutiny of Trump officials. The allegation is significant. They are saying that by pulling thousands of federal law enforcement agents away from white-collar crime investigations and redirecting them toward immigration enforcement, the Trump administration effectively shielded white-collar criminals from prosecution. Wealthy and connected people who would otherwise have been investigated and potentially prosecuted for financial crimes were able to escape accountability because the enforcement resources that would have been directed at them were redirected elsewhere for political reasons. If that allegation is accurate and these lawmakers are backing it with a formal investigative demand, it is another example of the Justice Department being used as a political tool rather than an independent law enforcement institution. Let me get into the full picture of what has been happening on Capitol Hill around accountability for Trump's inner circle. There are several distinct threads running through this story, and understanding each of them is important for seeing the full scope of what is being attempted and what has already been accomplished. Start with the Contempt of Congress framework because it is the most direct and most legally powerful tool Congress has for enforcing its oversight authority against defiant witnesses. When Congress issues a subpoena, that subpoena has the force of law. Complying with it is a legal obligation, not a political choice. When someone defies a congressional subpoena without a legally valid basis for doing so, they have committed a crime. Criminal contempt of Congress is a federal misdemeanor that carries potential fines and imprisonment. The process for enforcing it runs through the Justice Department. Congress votes to refer the contempt to the Justice Department. The Justice Department decides whether to prosecute. If prosecution happens and a conviction results, the contemptuous witness faces real legal consequences. That is the framework. What the Bannon and Navarro cases demonstrated is that the framework actually works when the Justice Department is willing to use it. Both men were prosecuted. Both were convicted. Both served prison sentences. The Contempt of Congress law is not just a paper tiger. It has real force, and it has been used against senior Trump allies who thought their status would protect them. The contrast between Bannon and Navarro on one hand and Meadows and Scavino on the other is worth examining carefully because it reveals something important about the limits of congressional accountability when the Justice Department is not a cooperative partner. Meadows was also referred for contempt. Scavino was also referred for contempt. But unlike Bannon and Navarro, Meadows and Scavino were not prosecuted. The Justice Department, under the circumstances at the time, declined to move forward with those prosecutions. That tells you something fundamental about the congressional contempt mechanism. It depends on the Justice Department for its ultimate enforcement. Congress can vote for contempt referrals, but if the executive branch's law enforcement arm decides not to prosecute, the referral sits there without legal consequence. The tool has real power when the Justice Department uses it. It has limited practical effect when the Justice Department refuses to use it. That dependency on Justice Department cooperation is one of the central tensions in the entire story of congressional accountability for Trump's allies. When Trump controls the Justice Department, as he does in his second term, the likelihood of the Justice Department prosecuting his allies for contempt of congressional subpoenas is essentially zero. That is why Democrats are focused not just on what they can do now, but on what they will be able to do if they regain the House and combine a more aggressive congressional oversight posture with whatever the judicial and prosecutorial landscape looks like at that point. Every letter, every referral demand, every contempt vote, every subpoena is both a current accountability action and a building block for what Democrats plan to do if they get the power to do more. The Bannon and Navarro precedents give them proof of concept that the tools work when properly deployed. This is a long-game strategy being executed with real precision and real urgency. Here is something about the Republicans who keep having to decide whether to join Democratic accountability efforts or stand with Trump that deserves serious attention. Every contempt vote puts them on record. Every criminal referral demand forces them to either support it or oppose it publicly. Every subpoena to a Trump ally creates a moment where Republicans have to decide whether oversight and accountability are principles they actually believe in or just talking points they use when the other party is in power. The votes that resulted in Bannon and Navarro going to prison were bipartisan in the sense that the contempt referrals had enough support to pass and the Justice Department prosecuted under a non-Trump administration. The question is whether the accumulating weight of second-term misconduct allegations, the Epstein document situation, the emergency powers rulings, the court-ordered defiance, the white-collar crime enforcement diversion generates enough bipartisan concern to produce the kind of cross-party accountability cooperation that would actually have legal force. That threshold has not been reached yet. But every new allegation and every new formal accountability demand moves the political calculation for individual Republicans who are watching their own approval numbers and their own re-election prospects. Let me get into the specific takeaways from this entire congressional accountability story. There are several clear and consequential points that deserve to be spelled out directly. The Bannon and Navarro convictions prove something enormously important that changes how we should evaluate every subsequent congressional accountability action. They prove that the contempt of Congress mechanism actually works, that it is not just a paper tiger that generates headlines and nothing else, that when Congress votes to refer contempt, when the Justice Department decides to prosecute, and when a jury hears the evidence, Trump allies go to prison. Senior advisors to the President of the United States go to federal prison for defying congressional subpoenas. That is a real consequence. It happened. It established a precedent and a proof of concept that every future congressional accountability effort can point to. When Democrats subpoena Pam Bondi and she is weighing whether to comply, the Bannon and Navarro cases are part of the legal landscape she is operating in. When other Trump allies consider defying congressional oversight demands, those convictions are data points in their legal calculus. The mechanism works. It has been used. Knowing that it works changes how seriously everyone in Trump's orbit has to take congressional oversight demands. The January 6th criminal referral of Trump himself represents a historical marker that is going to matter for how this presidency is ultimately judged and understood, regardless of whether it ever results in prosecution. A congressional committee formally recommended criminal charges against the former president of the United States. That is documented. It is part of the permanent public record. The specific charges, the specific legal citations, the specific factual support, all of it is in the committee's final report, which is a public document that anyone can read. Future historians, future legal scholars, future prosecutors operating in a different political environment, all of them have access to a detailed, documented congressional finding that Trump's conduct met the legal standard for multiple federal felonies. That finding does not expire. It does not lose its significance just because the current Justice Department is not going to act on it. It is there, and it is going to be part of how this period of American history is understood and evaluated for a very long time. The demand for an investigation into white-collar crime enforcement diversion is potentially the most politically significant of the current wave of accountability demands because it connects Trump's policy decisions to concrete harm to ordinary people, and it does so in a way that is potentially bipartisan. The argument is straightforward. Trump pulled thousands of federal agents away from white-collar crime enforcement and redirected them to immigration crackdowns. White-collar criminals who would otherwise have been investigated and potentially prosecuted benefited from that resource diversion. Real people who were victimized by financial fraud and corporate misconduct lost the protection of federal law enforcement because it was redirected elsewhere for political purposes. That is a story about wealthy and connected people escaping accountability because a president decided their protection was more important than the protection of ordinary crime victims. That framing, Trump protecting wealthy criminals at the expense of everyday people, is politically significant in ways that go beyond normal partisan lines. The formal investigative demand backed by nearly 30 lawmakers gives it an institutional seriousness that pure political rhetoric does not have. Democrats are playing a long game on accountability that is specifically calibrated around the possibility of regaining House control. Every accountability action they are taking right now serves a dual purpose. It is both a current attempt to document and publicize alleged misconduct and a building block for a much more aggressive accountability campaign they are planning.